7 of Australia's best-selling coffee brands just failed a blind taste test. Jars charging you $12 scored worse than the $4 one, sitting one shelf below it. 2 rivals fighting for your trolley aren't rivals at all. Same company, same factory, different label lying to your face. Only 3 brands actually passed. Number 10, Starbucks. The green logo you trust because you've already paid $4 or $5 a cup for it standing in a cafe queue. Here's what almost nobody standing in the supermarket aisle actually knows. Since 2018, Nestlé holds the global license to manufacture and sell every packaged Starbucks product outside the company's own cafes, in a deal reportedly worth billions of dollars. One of the single biggest licensing agreements in the history of food and drink. That jar with the mermaid on it isn't coming out of Seattle, and it isn't coming from anywhere near the cafe you associate the name with. It's produced under Nestlé's own global coffee operation, the exact same corporate machine sitting behind Nescafe, the brand it's technically competing against for your attention on that very same shelf. 2 names, dressed up as rivals, fighting over the same $4, manufactured by the same company standing behind both labels. In that same blind panel, the Starbucks jar was specifically named as one of the products beaten outright by a homegrown Australian brand, costing a small fraction of the price. A jar most shoppers walk straight past without a second glance on their way to the more famous name. One shopper interviewed for the original research admitted she'd been buying that green jar for years purely because of the coffee shop association it triggered in her head, and had never once stopped to check who actually made it. The logo is doing the selling here, not the coffee, because once the label comes off in a blind test, the 2 supposed rivals sitting in your cupboard turn out to answer to the exact same boss. Your move. Next time you reach for that green jar purely out of habit, remember you're not actually choosing between 2 coffee companies competing for your loyalty. You're choosing between 2 labels owned by the very same one and paying a premium for the privilege of not knowing that. And the very next name on this list belongs to that same parent company too, with an even bigger story attached to the price tag. Number 9, Nescafe Gold. The dark glass jar with the gold lid, sitting above the regular blend on both the shelf and the price tag, wrapped in language about rich creamer and bold aroma that's been on Australian shelves for decades. In that same blind panel, Nescafe Gold came in at 76 out of 100, priced at roughly $7.50 per 100 grams. That's close to double what a budget home brand jar cost, for a result that actually landed lower on the exact same blind scorecard. $7.50 100 grams for a jar that a $2 cheaper option beat, while nobody sitting in that testing room had any idea which was which. Nescafe's regular blend also carries the phrase 100% sustainable coffee beans printed straight across the front of the pack, in bold letters, right where you'd see it reaching for the jar on autopilot. When the watchdog asked Nestlé to actually back that specific claim up, the company's own written response was that its global target is to reach fully responsible sourcing by 2025, verified through external certifiers the company itself selects and pays to carry out the audit. That's a real process, and to be fair, it deserves some credit. But 100% sustainable printed in bold letters on your kitchen bench is doing a lot more convincing than an internal corporate target ever earns on its own. Nescafe belongs to Nestlé, a Swiss multinational pulling in close to 90 billion Swiss francs a year across everything from baby formula to bottled water to pet food, an empire so large that coffee is honestly just one small slice of it. A jar scoring behind the cheap stuff isn't costing anyone at head office a single wink of sleep, because the gold lid still wins the aisle every single week, regardless of what the blind cup actually says about it. Run that $7.50 jar across a household getting through one a month, against a $4 option scoring the same or better, and you're looking at more than $40 a year spent purely on the colour of the lid. Your move. Check the price per 100 grams before the colour of that lid makes the decision for you at the shelf. The next name on this list belongs to a company running that exact same trick, except it's doing it 3 separate times over on the very same aisle. Number 8. Moccona. The gold cylindrical jar that's been sitting in the treat yourself section of Australian supermarkets since it first landed here in 1960, wrapped in old-world Dutch heritage stretching back to a grocery store from 1753. The kind of story printed right there on the label to make you feel like you're paying for something rare. In that same blind test, Mokona's specialty blend scored 75 out of 100, tied for the single lowest result in the entire comparison, priced at $8.50 per 100 grams. Woolworths' own plain home brand jar scored exactly the same, 75 out of 100 at $4 per 100 grams. Less than half the price for an absolutely identical result once the label came off both jars. Mokona belongs to JDE Peet's, a Dutch coffee giant that's majority owned by an American company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, reporting annual revenue north of €7 billion across more than 50 separate brands worldwide, coffee being just one arm of a genuinely enormous business. And here's the detail that should honestly make your blood boil a little. In 2023, JDE took a real Australian family coffee company to federal court, arguing that the family's glass jar looked too similar to Mokona's own packaging. The court threw the entire case out, every single claim dismissed. A multinational sitting on more than 50 brands tried to use the legal system to muscle a small local family business off the shelf over the shape of a jar, and lost outright. Your move? An $8.50 jar tied for dead last in a blind test isn't buying you heritage, no matter how old the story printed on the label is. It's buying you a company that tried to sue a family business out of existence and didn't even manage that. And Mokona isn't the only name on this list wearing that exact same Dutch parent company's badge. Number 7. Loire. One of JDE Peet's other capsule lines, sitting in the machine-compatible aisle right alongside Mokona's own capsule range, promising cafe-style variety at a slightly friendlier price than the bigger Swiss name a shelf along. Run the actual maths on it, and the underlying gap barely moves at all. A standard capsule holds around 5 to 6 grams of real coffee and typically costs somewhere between 55 cents and 80 cents, which works out to somewhere between $100 and $140 for every kilogram of coffee you're actually consuming, once you strip away the packaging and just look at the grams. Compare that to $40 to $90 a kilogram for most of the jars sitting further along this exact list. You're paying a genuinely heavy premium for a small aluminium pod, wearing a slightly cheaper looking label, while the company cashing your check is identical to the one standing behind Mokona 2 shelves over. Your move. Before you assume a cheaper looking capsule brand is automatically the better deal on price, check who actually owns it, because the answer is very often the exact same multinational simply wearing a different outfit for a different aisle. Which brings us to the third and final brand carrying that very same parent company's fingerprints. Number 6. Harris, the third JDE Peet's capsule brand on Australian shelves, usually dressed in orange and green packaging designed specifically to look budget-friendly and homegrown next to its flashier siblings. Same parent company as Mokona and Loire. Same lack of any real council-backed recycling pathway once the pod actually leaves your kitchen bench. 3 different names, 3 different price points, 3 different marketing angles, all funneling straight back to the exact same balance sheet, wearing 3 different outfits stacked next to each other so it genuinely looks like you're choosing between 3 rivals when you're really just choosing between 3 arms of the same company competing with itself for your loyalty. Your move? If a box in your cupboard doesn't clearly state a certified take-back scheme printed right there on the packaging itself, assume it's headed straight for landfill, no matter how premium the foil looks under the supermarket lights. Stop for a second and actually sit with that, because it's worth repeating. 3 separate brands, 3 separate shelf positions, 3 separate marketing budgets, each one built to make you feel like you're picking between genuinely different companies competing for your loyalty. And every single dollar you hand over, no matter which of the 3 jars you grab, ends up in the exact same account at the exact same head office in the Netherlands. That's not illegal, and it's not even unusual in grocery retail, but it is exactly the kind of thing the packaging is specifically designed to make you never notice while you're standing there deciding between them on a Tuesday afternoon. And speaking of capsules quietly filling up your household bin week after week, the single biggest name in that entire category has an entirely separate problem worth putting on the record. Number 5. Nespresso. Coffee pods are one of the fastest growing categories in Australian coffee, and almost nobody standing at the machine each morning pressing the button has actually sat down and run the real numbers on what they're paying per kilogram. A standard Nespresso capsule works out to somewhere between $100 and $140 a kilogram once you account for how little actual coffee sits inside that small aluminium shell. against $40 to $90 a kilogram for most of the jars sitting on this very same list. Then there's the part almost nobody thinks about while clicking the capsule into place each morning. Nespresso's own recycling program relies entirely on you personally gathering up used pods and dropping them at a participating boutique, a florist, or posting them back through the mail with a few hundred drop-off points scattered nationally. That sounds generous on paper until you realize it's an opt-in system, not curbside collection like the yellow lid bin sitting outside your front door. Councils across the country confirm plainly that coffee pods cannot go in your household recycling bin because they're simply too small and fall straight through the sorting machinery at the recovery facility, contaminating the entire load around them. To Nespresso's credit, a curbside pilot is now running through a handful of council areas, separating capsules right at the sorting facility itself, and that's a genuinely positive step forward. But for most Australian households right now, keeping that capsule out of landfill is entirely on you. One pod at a time, week after week, for as long as the machine sits on your bench. Your move? If you're running a capsule machine at home, be honest with yourself about how many of those used pods are actually making the trip back to a proper drop-off point, and how many are quietly disappearing into your general household bin without you ever noticing. One Melbourne household interviewed as part of the original research estimated they'd been running a capsule machine for close to 4 years, without ever once looking up where the used pods were actually supposed to go, simply dropping them straight in the kitchen bin along with everything else, week after week, for 4 straight years, before anyone in the house thought to check. From capsules that drain your wallet one small aluminium pod at a time, the next name on this list drains it in plain sight, right there on the shelf tag, with nothing hidden about it at all. Number 4. Republica. This one doesn't get talked about much on a shelf full of louder, more famous names, but it earns its spot this high for one single number that's genuinely hard to ignore. In that same blind panel, Republica scored 75 out of 100, tied for the lowest result of every single product measured in the entire test, at $12 per 100 grams. The single most expensive coffee in the whole comparison, ahead of Lavazza, ahead of Moccona, ahead of everything else sitting on that table. $12 for 100 grams, for the exact same blind result as jars costing a third of that price, sitting one shelf below it in the very same store. Run that out across a jar a month for an average household, and you're looking at well over $140 extra a year, spent purely on branding, packaging, and shelf position, with absolutely nothing extra landing in the actual cup to show for any of it. There's no scandal buried in Republica's ingredient list here, and no dodgy sourcing story to expose in the traditional sense. The issue is simpler than that, and in some ways, more frustrating. It's a premium price with nothing measurable behind the premium, sitting right next to jars costing a third as much and scoring exactly the same on a blind panel with no idea which jar was which. Your move. The most expensive jar on the shelf is not a reliable stand-in for the best tasting one, and this is the single cleanest proof of that fact in this entire list. The next brand at least has genuine, real heritage behind its price tag, even if the cup doesn't fully back that heritage up either. Number 3. Lavazza. Imported straight from Italy, wrapped in real heritage stretching back to 1895 in Turin, and priced accordingly at $11.58 per 100 grams on Australian shelves. To be properly fair to Lavazza here, it actually scored a respectable 78 out of 100 in that same blind test, a genuinely clear step above several names already sitting on this list. But that's still a lower score than options costing less than half as much per 100 grams, sitting one shelf down in the exact same store. None of this makes Lavazza a bad coffee by any stretch. 78 out of 100 is a genuinely competitive result in this entire category. It's simply a reminder that imported and Italian heritage since 1895 are doing more work on the price tag printed on the shelf than they're doing in the actual cup once the label comes off and the blind tasting genuinely begins. Your move. Heritage is a real thing worth paying for if it's genuinely what you value in a jar. Just go into that purchase knowing exactly what you're paying the premium for, because taste alone isn't the full story here. And it's worth noting that Lavazza isn't hiding anything either. The century plus of roasting history printed on that jar is completely real, verifiable, and genuinely earned, which is exactly why it lands here in the middle of this list, rather than down with the brands still to come. Being imported and being overpriced for what's actually in the cup aren't automatically the same accusation, and Lavazza is proof of that distinction. From an honestly earned premium, the next name on this list belongs to the very supermarket you probably already trust the least, to be straight with you. Number 2. Woolworths' own home brand freeze-dried classic coffee. Sitting quietly down on the bottom shelf, right where the price-conscious shoppers instinctively look first on their way through the aisle. Here's exactly why it earns a spot this high on the list. This is the result that genuinely complicates the easy assumption that home brand automatically means lower quality, or for that matter, automatically means better value either. In that same blind test, Woolworths' own jar scored 75 out of 100, tied for the lowest result in the entire comparison, sitting right alongside Moccona at more than double the price and Republica at 3 times the price. At $4, it's still a perfectly reasonable buy compared to those $8.50 and $12 jars scoring exactly the same result on the exact same blind scorecard. But it's proof that cheap and good aren't automatically the same thing in this aisle either. In either direction, you want to argue it. A $4 price tag doesn't automatically earn your trust any more than a $12 one does. And the only thing that genuinely tells you anything real is the actual number a blind panel writes down with no idea whose jar they're tasting. Your move. Don't assume the home brand jar is either the obvious smart pick or the obvious compromise pick before you've actually checked the number behind it. And the very last name on this list delivers the single clearest proof in this entire video that the brand printed proudly on the jar tells you almost nothing about what's genuinely sitting inside it. Number 1. Cafe Aurora. Here's the twist that ties this entire list together, and it's exactly why it takes the very top spot on this countdown. Cafe Aurora sits inside Vittoria Food and Beverage, the family-owned Australian company behind Vittoria, the country's own number 1 pure coffee brand, alongside a wider stable of other lines including its own dedicated capsule range. In that same blind test, Cafe Aurora's Italian-style freeze-dried coffee scored 76 out of 100, at $7 per 100 grams. Its own sister product, sitting on a nearby shelf under the Vittoria name itself, scored a full 80 out of 100 in a similar price bracket, the single highest score of any product measured in the entire test. Same family, same company. Almost certainly the same roasting expertise, sitting somewhere inside the very same building, quite possibly the same week. And yet a genuinely different result in the actual cup, purely depending on which name happens to sit printed on the front of that particular jar. That's the clearest proof in this whole video that the name on a label tells you far less than an actual blind score does, even when it's the exact same company standing behind both products. On the exact same shelf, in the exact same aisle you walked down yourself this morning without thinking twice about it. 10 real, named brands. Some underscoring their own price tag badly, some hiding a foreign owner behind an Aussie-sounding name and heritage story, and one quietly competing against its very own sister product without you ever knowing it. Now here's the part that actually changes what goes in your trolley next week. The 3 that genuinely earned it. The 3 that passed. In third place, and they're grouped together here because the actual testing data genuinely groups them together whether we like it or not. Coles' own organic freeze-dried coffee and Aldi's own gold-style dark roast. In that same blind comparison, both jars scored 79 out of 100, matching the exact score given to a freshly and professionally brewed long black used by the testers themselves as their own internal benchmark for the entire panel. Made from proper ground beans pulled through a real espresso machine by a trained barista. Both of these supermarket home brand jars cost right around $4 per 100 grams. 2 of the absolute cheapest jars in the entire Australian coffee aisle performed identically under genuine blind conditions with no labels visible to the tasters. To a freshly ground reference, coffee pulled through a proper machine, while jars costing 2 to 3 times as much scored noticeably lower on that exact same scale sitting right next to them. If your only filter for buying coffee up until this very morning has been the more expensive jar must automatically be the better one. This is the single most useful fact in this entire video, and an independent panel proved it wrong with real, checkable numbers, not opinions, and not a glossy label doing the talking. For a household getting through a jar every few weeks, switching straight down from something like Republica or Moccona to either of these 2 options, with absolutely 0 drop in blind-tested quality, is one of the easiest genuine wins available in your entire weekly shop, and it takes about 10 seconds standing in that aisle the next time you're deciding which jar goes into the trolley. In second place, Vittoria Mountain Grown, 100% Arabica, instant freeze-dried coffee. In that same test, Vittoria came out ahead of every single other product measured across the entire comparison, scoring a full 80 out of 100, 1 full point higher than even the fresh reference coffee itself, at $12.50 per 100 grams. Vittoria is genuinely actually Australian, not in the loose, patriotic-sounding way packaging so often implies with a flag printed somewhere on the front, but in real, checkable fact. Family-owned since two Sicilian brothers began roasting out of Sydney's Haymarket back in 1958, and still run today by 3 generations of that very same family, with the next generation already being actively brought up through the business. This is also the very same company that beat JDE Peet's, Mokona's own multinational parent, in federal court back in 2023 after JDE tried to argue Vittoria's own glass jar was deceptively similar to Mokona's packaging. Every single one of JDE's claims was dismissed by the judge in that case, in full. In a detail that almost nobody standing in that aisle ever clocks, Vittoria is also the very company manufacturing Aldi's own brand coffee capsules right here in Australia. Confirmed directly by the company's own managing director in an interview, the exact same Australian roaster sitting quietly behind both a proud family-name jar and a budget capsule line that most shoppers assume come from 2 entirely unrelated companies. 100% Arabica, roasted by people with 3 generations of their own family name genuinely riding on the result every single batch, and a blind panel noticed the difference without ever once being told whose jar it was actually tasting or what it cost on the shelf. And, in first place, Bushells Classic Gourmet Instant Coffee. This is the jar almost nobody standing in that aisle expects to win, and that's precisely why it earns the very top spot on this entire list. In a separate blind test run with expert judges pulled from a professional barista training academy, Bushells Classic Gourmet was rated the single best performing instant coffee out of 18 different products tasted that day, beating Lavazza outright, beating Mokona outright, beating Starbucks branded Instant outright, and holding its own convincingly against a genuine espresso machine reference, coffee poured fresh by the judges themselves, at a price of roughly $10 for 200 grams. That works out to about 30 cents a cup, close to 20 times cheaper than a single takeaway long black from your local cafe. One of the judges running that particular panel has said openly and on the record that he walked into the tasting genuinely expecting instant coffee to be something of a joke, and walked straight back out stocking Bushells in his own professional training academy that very same afternoon, serving it to his own students without a second thought about it since. Bushells is Australian-owned, bought outright from its previous multinational owner back in 1998, and it's still roasted today at the very same Sydney site it's been made at for generations, long before most of the flashier names sitting higher up this list had even landed on Australian shelves in the first place. Robert Tim's, another Australian-owned brand roasted at that exact same Sydney facility, also placed near the very top of a separate blind ranking with its own full-bodied granulated coffee, which strongly suggests this isn't just a one-off fluke result for a single jar, but a genuine, repeatable pattern for the roaster standing quietly behind both brands. 30 cents a cup, rated better under blind conditions than brands charging 4 to 5 times as much on the very same shelf, made by an Australian-owned roaster that most shoppers have walked straight past for years without ever giving it a second glance on their way to the fancier jar next to it. Run the annual maths on it properly. 2 cups a day from a Bushells jar costs an average household somewhere around $200 a year. The same 2 cups a day from Republica, scoring worse in the exact same blind test, cost closer to $875 a year for a demonstrably inferior result once the label comes off both jars. That's over $600 a year sitting there in the gap between the jar you probably already own and the jar you've been walking straight past for years without a second thought. For anyone genuinely trying to cut their weekly grocery bill without cutting the actual quality of what's in the cup, this is about as close to a completely free win as that coffee aisle gets you. So here's exactly where all of that actually leaves you standing in the aisle. 10 real, named products sitting in your local coffee aisle right now, each one carrying a story on the label that doesn't quite match the facts sitting behind it once you actually go looking. A foreign-owned giant competing against its own licensed rival brand for your $4, both answering to the very same head office. A multinational suing an Australian family business over the shape of a jar and losing every single claim in court. 3 separate capsule brands owned by the exact same company, dressed up in 3 completely different outfits to look like genuine competition. Capsules costing more per kilogram than some cuts of steak, and mostly ending up in landfill regardless of what color the foil happens to be. A sustainability claim that turns out to be considerably softer than the bold print on the front of the pack actually suggests. Even one single company's own sister brand quietly scoring behind its own flagship product, sitting on the very same shelf, under the very same roof. And 3 genuine jars hiding in plain sight, most of them sitting under $5, that a real blind panel proved actually deliver in the cup, with hard numbers to back it up, not a heritage story and not a celebrity endorsement doing the heavy lifting. Next time you're standing in Coles, Woolworths or Aldi deciding what goes in the trolley, do one simple thing before you reach for your usual jar, purely out of habit. Check the price per 100 grams printed in the fine print, not the size of the tin sitting in your hand. Because that's the only number that actually lets you compare 2 products honestly side by side, and the supermarkets are quietly counting on the fact that most shoppers standing right there in that aisle never once bother to do that, maths themselves. One last thing before you go, none of what you just heard came out of a leaked document or a locked lab report sitting on somebody's desk. Every single fact in this video sits inside a public taste test that most Australian shoppers have simply never taken 10 minutes to sit down and actually read for themselves. It's freely available online right now for anyone willing to go looking for it, and almost nobody does because the coffee aisle is built on the safe assumption that you won't. If one of these 10 jars was sitting in your own cupboard this very morning, drop the number in the comments below because I genuinely read every single one of them. Hit like right now if this just changed what's going into your trolley next week. And subscribe because the supermarket price riser court just proved was a lie is coming up next on this channel, and it might honestly be an even bigger shock than absolutely anything you just heard across this entire list today.